the first time that you actually go to prepare a tax return, what will actually go into it? What will you need? Well, the good news is that compared to when I first did a tax return, and you can still do it this way, I actually learned how to do a tax return when you actually pick up a pen and do it yourself by hand. And so now, the great thing about today, of course, is we have technology. And so there are so many different types of software that are available, and many of them, to a point, are free. And when are they not free? Well, when you get to be my age, and you're married, you have kids, you have a home, taxes become a little more complicated. And so the more complicated taxes get, the more forms you might need to fill out. And so that's for later. And so when that happens, it gets a little more complicated. Believe me, I am thankful for the technology software that we have for taxes now. So even if I have to sometimes pay a little bit for it. So the good news is, you learning taxes and me learning taxes are really, you can almost say, in two different eras. I learned taxes with a pen and the form and a calculator. And I'll tell you what else you need. But now, you can still do it that way, okay? But also, what you have now is you can go online and they will walk you through it. Now, just so you know, if you ever do your taxes online, and I did this when I sat down with my son when he started doing taxes, and he said, okay, which one do I use? What website, what software? A lot of them will allow you to start using it for free. You're not paying anything. And so you can kind of learn that way too. It's almost like a trial run. And so I had my son use two different tax software because I wanted him to see two different ones and get used to doing it. And make more sense. The great thing is, the software today will ask you questions. So they can't, if you're worried about making a mistake, it's kind of nerve-wracking. It's taxes, it's money. And if you're worried about making a mistake, well, a lot of times the software won't let you. If you forget to do something, they'll actually go back at the end, they'll do a check, and they'll say, okay, you actually didn't fill this part of the form out. So again, that's the beauty of it. When I sat down with somebody who had done taxes, and I kind of watched and did the math, and so it was a little harder for me. Now, I still think it was beneficial, but today's world with the software, it's so much easier to learn. So, okay, tax day. First of all, when? If you're saying, you know, what time of the year, when do you do this? You do your taxes every year, and how I always look at it is when the calendar changes, so New Year's Day happens and it's the next year. Okay, the first part of the new year is when you're going to start getting forms that I'll tell you about. You'll start getting things you need to do your taxes. And then what happens is, tax day, unless something unusual happens and the government tells everyone, tax day is always on or around April 15th. April 15th, April 15th. Now when I say on or around, sometimes if it's on a Sunday, they might extend it a day and say, okay, you have until Monday the 16th to get your taxes in. But now, a lot of times, it's online. And so, again, that's the beauty of it. I used to have to mail my taxes in before we had the internet. I had to mail the forms in. It would take weeks to get everything through. Mail it to them, wait for a while. If I got a return, it would come several weeks later. Today, it's different. So that's the beauty of the internet and the beauty of the software. So April 15th, though, is tax day. So you have to have your taxes done and turned in by April 15th every year. So what starts happening is I tell myself, okay, January, it's January. It's the new year. Okay, time to start thinking about taxes. I've got a few months here to get all of the paperwork I need, I'll tell you what that is, and to actually get my taxes done. Now, if you're saying, how can I get my taxes done for that year at the beginning of the year? You're not. You're doing the taxes for the previous year. So let's say it was 2016, and then it turned into 2017. Well, in April of 2017, and I'm not trying to confuse you, follow me, in April of 2017, I turned in the 2016 taxes. The whole year has to happen before I can turn in a tax return. So hopefully that makes sense. If you're saying, okay, so once the whole year is over with and we flip to the new year, now I can do that year's taxes. Okay? So now, what do you need? What are you going to have to do when you actually sit down to do your taxes, especially for the first time? Or when do you need to do them? Best example I can give you, I used to mow lawns. When I was like 13, 14, 15 years old, I mowed lawns, and I got paid cash. Did I have to do tax returns? No. I got paid in cash. I went to somebody's house and mowed their lawn. I had to start doing a tax return when I got what I call a real job. A real job is they are giving you a paycheck, and you're having things taken out of your paycheck. I don't know, like taxes. And so that's when you have to start declaring what you made for that year. My son, he had to fill out a tax return when he started working at a grocery store. So he had hours, he went to work, they gave him a paycheck, there were deductions taken out of it for taxes. End of the year, he has to turn in a tax return. So that's how you know, okay? Now, when you do that, what do you need? One of the things that your employer will send you in the mail sometime in the new year, usually you want it by the end of January, is something called your W-2. Your W-2 form is the form that shows this is how much money you made, this is how much taxes were taken out. Now, again, follow me, there's more than one type of tax. When you're talking income tax, an income tax return, well, there's federal income tax, there's state income tax, there's local income tax. So I paid tax the city I work in, the state I work in, the country I work in. There's 3 types, okay? So your W-2 actually will come in multiple copies. And the reason there's multiple copies is if you actually mail it in, which you can still do, if you mail in your taxes, you have to attach your W-2. Now, if you're saying, well, what if I don't? What if I'm on the computer? There's a code you punch in. Once you punch the code in, they've got it. Okay, so, or sometimes you just have to fill in what it says on the W-2 on the computer. And so either way, they still have your W-2 if you do it with software on the computer. But if you mail it in, you get multiple copies of your W-2 to prove what you made and to prove how much tax was taken out. Okay? Without a W-2, you really can't do taxes. You're going to need your W-2 from your employer. Your employer will give that to you. Normally by the end of January, you should have it. So you have your W-2. It's hopefully before April 15th. And you sit down and you will fill out something called a 1040. And a 1040, this is kind of a universal form, a 1040 is the tax return itself. So what do? Well, a lot of times this is where the software will help you. The basis is this. Here's how much money I made. This was my gross pay. This is how much money I made from my employer. Then this is how much tax was taken out. If it's a federal form, it'll be the federal tax. The 1040 is the federal form. How much federal tax was taken out of your paycheck? And again, the software, once you put in the W-2 information into the software, it does it for you. It'll tell you right in the corner, here's how much you're getting back, or here's how much you owe. Now, if you're saying, okay, how's that work? Well, basically, here's how much I made, here's how much tax was taken out, and this will be the first type of return you fill out before you're married, before you have kids and all the other complications. This is how much I made, this is how much was taken out, and then what they do, based off of how much you made, you're in a tax bracket. And basically they'll say, okay, well, you owed us this much tax. You paid this much tax. So it's simple math. And what they'll say is, okay, you paid too much tax, so you get a refund. Now, hopefully, you didn't pay too little tax, because then you would owe, okay? So that's basically what's happening when you're preparing a tax return. You need the W-2. You need to know from your employer, how much did I make? How much total did I make for the year? How much total was taken out in tax? And then what does that mean when we do the basic math? What does that mean? Do I get a return? Hopefully. Or hopefully not, you don't owe. So that's really what you're talking about. And remember that there is federal income tax, there is state income tax, there is local income tax. And there are different forms for each. But basically, it's looking at how much did you make and how much did you pay in taxes. And then hopefully at the end, you get a refund. So you got to have that W-2. You have to know your personal information, things like Social Security number. And then once you have that, especially with today's software, it's made a lot easier for you because it will walk you through the steps. It's really not that scary once you really sit down and just do what it tells you to do. We'll see you next time.